What's going on, everyone? Zach back here with another episode of Clutch Crew Sports. And here on today's episode, I've got two regular guests. You might have heard them before to talk about their divisions. I'm excited to hear about their favorite teams and what they think will happen within their divisions. Let me introduce you to the rest of the crew.
What's going on, guys? It's Connor, the co-host with the most, and I've been on two of these division episodes already. I got to hear Aaron talk about the Panthers and Brody and Caleb talk about the Packers, and I also sat in and listened in on Zach and Eric talk about the Jaguars. So I'm finally ready. It's my time to shine. Finally get to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I couldn't be more excited.
What's up, guys? It's Nate here. I'm excited to finally talk football again. It feels like it's been a while since we've had some real stuff to talk about, basically since the draft. So I'm excited to talk about the.
Nate, you there?
Uh-oh.
Okay. All right.
Well, let's
We'll
start
wait
with
for Nate to come back in, but we'll do with AFC North first. All right, so we're gonna start off here talking about the AFC North, and Connor, obviously being our resident Steelers fan, knows this division pretty well. So Steelers fans, this you should enjoy this episode listening to Connor talk mostly about the Steelers, but fans of other teams, Browns, Bengals, Ravens, still stick around because at the end he's going to give his assessment of those teams as well. So should be some good stuff here. So I'll start off, Connor, with the first question for you. So just tell us your general expectations for the Steelers in 2020.
Well, I'm not going to be too overly optimistic with them this year. I know last season I obviously picked them to win the division, but I don't think anybody would have thought that Ben Roethlisberger was going to miss pretty much the whole season and what was going to happen with that. So I'm being a little bit more cautious this year, especially with I'm going to talk about them a little bit later, but especially with the Ravens still hanging around in the division. I definitely think the Steelers can get a wild card spot because if you look at obviously the NFL is going to the 17 playoff this year, and if you look at the past two seasons, if we had the 17 playoff, the Steelers would have made it both times. Like they were the first team out both times the past two seasons. So I definitely think a wild card spot is a definite possibility, especially if Roethlisberger can stay healthy the whole season. And it's really going to be if we can get to the playoffs, I think we can do some real damage. I think the AFC is obviously this is kind of a trend that's been going on recently in the NFL that the AFC is quite a bit weaker than the NFC in my opinion. Like there's a lot more contenders in the NFC than there are in the AFC. So definitely, if we get a first round matchup with somebody like possibly the Titans or maybe the Bills, then we could definitely have a shot to go further in the playoffs. Because other than KC and Baltimore, I think the AFC is that the consensus probably third best team in the AFC is pretty wide open after those two teams. So I think definitely maybe a playoff win is in order. A wild card and a playoff win will be my realistic expectations for them.
Yeah, the AFC definitely is top heavy. I think that's a good way to describe it. So my next question though for you is going to be, who are you most excited for on your team? Let's go offense and defense here.
All right. Well, offense, I guess I'm really excited for Chase Claypool. I wasn't thrilled when I saw that we took another wide receiver in the second round. That's like 3 years in a row now that we've taken a wide receiver in the second round. But I definitely think he's going to be a much better. Like he's got that kind of Julio Jones-esque build to him. He's definitely a bigger receiver, which I think is what the Steelers really need, because Juju's obviously a really tall guy and he's somewhat big, but after that, James Washington is small and short. Ryan Switzer is small and short. Deontay Johnson is average. So I think we really need a big physical wide receiver on the team to really go with that. So definitely Chase Claypool. And I think if I had to pick like a second favorite person that I'm also excited for, I'm excited for Eric Ebron to be on the team. I think he's going to have a real big resurgence, finally having like an all-pro quarterback throwing to him and not getting throws from Jacoby Brissett. So Chase Claypool and Eric Ebron on the offense. On the defense, Um, this is a tough one on the defense because we're pretty much bringing back the entire defense from last season, so there's nobody new to talk about. But I guess I'll say Devin Bush just because I'm interested to see his evolution in year two. I mean, he was really good in year one, and especially now that the Steelers we let go of Mark Barron, so Devin Bush is going to be the starting middle linebacker now. I think Vince Williams is going to be relegated to a number two role, so I'm really interested to see if he can kind of step into that role that I guess not really role, but more so a void that was left when Ryan Shazier had his unfortunate incident that happened. So I'm really excited to see where he goes in year two.
All right. And then we know from last year with the Steelers, really missed Big Ben down the stretch of the season, but he was out basically the entire year. Do you think he's going to return to be like a Pro Bowl level quarterback? Do you think he makes a Pro Bowl next year?
I think so. I mean, obviously, it all depends on whether he stays healthy or not because he's suffered a lot of injuries over the course of his career. It's been very few and far between when he's played a full 16 games. So if he can stay healthy, I definitely think he can because obviously, if you remember the year before last season, he was a 5,000 yard passer. So it's kind of weird that he's it seems to be a trend in the NFL. I don't know with guys like Peyton Manning and Drew Brees and Tom Brady, and now Roethlisberger to a lesser extent that it seems like these quarterbacks tend to put up bigger and bigger stats as they get older, which you would think that it would be the opposite. Like when they were younger, they'd put up huge stats, but some of Roethlisberger's best seasons have been in the past couple of years when he's now getting into his mid 30s and into his 13th year playing in the league. So I definitely think he can be a Pro Bowl quarterback. He definitely has the weapons around him. He's got two solid tight ends with Eric Ebron and Vance McDonald. I think that'll really help the Steelers with their offensive game plan because they've been running a lot of spread with their offense, but now with two tight ends, you can switch to more two tight end sets and less five wide sets. And also just lots of young wide receivers. I mean, you can really interchange. Juju's still going to be the number one despite the down year last year. But you could really interchange the other three between Claypool, Washington, and Deontay Johnson. So I definitely think Roethlisberger can do it. And I think he's going to be helped by the fact that the Steelers have kind of accepted now that James Conner is not going to be like an every down true number one running back. They are going to move to a more committee style backfield this year with James Conner and Benny Snell and Jalen Samuels is like a third down running back. So I think that's going to help the Steelers out a lot. Just having a couple of running backs that can catch the ball as well as run the ball, but also if they can just get that running game going, because that was the other thing that hurt Roethlisberger that year that he threw for 5,000 yards, but he also, he had a lot of pass attempts to get to that, and he also threw a lot of interceptions because the other teams just knew like they're going to pass, they don't have a running game. So that running game, if that really at least becomes a threat, it doesn't have to be fantastic, but if it at least becomes a threat, then I definitely think Roethlisberger can be a Pro Bowl quarterback again if he stays healthy.
Okay. All right. Nate, why don't you go ahead and ask the question you made for Connor?
Yeah, so my question was, assuming Ben stays healthy, like you kind of just touched on, do you think that Juju will emerge as a legit number one receiver this season? He he showed the promise his first 2 years, made the Pro Bowl in 2018, but a lot of people said, oh, it's because he had Antonio Brown in his prime playing on the other side of the field. My question is, do you think with a full season of good quarterback play, if he can finally step up as number one and do it all on his own?
I do think so. He can. I think the main thing for him is he needs to. There are definitely mistakes that he made last season that he needs to cut down on. He needs to not fumble the ball in key situations to start with, and I think really just having other receivers around him too. I think the Steelers have a lot of wide receiver talent that they're not going to be keying on him as much, and obviously the biggest thing, like you were asking with Ben, having Ben Roethlisberger as your quarterback as opposed to Mason Rudolph or Devlin Hodges, like I think a lot of people kind of forgot that a little bit when they were really ragging on Juju, like, oh, he had Antonio Brown next to him, and as soon as he's gone, he has this bad year. But it's like, you had not with Mason Rudolph, but like with Devlin Hodges, you basically had some guy off the street like throwing him passes in football games. So definitely with Ben Roethlisberger back, I think he can do it. It will definitely be the telling year for sure. Like if he doesn't do it this year, like you said, if Ben stays healthy, then he's not gonna ever be a number one receiver, and he's just gonna be, I don't know if the Steelers will have like a wide receiver by committee, or if maybe they're going to want someone like Claypool to step up as the number one receiver, but it's his year to shine. If Ben stays healthy, he can do it. He's put up the numbers before, so definitely I think he can do it.
All right, so that'll wrap up the Steelers talk for now. Let's go around the rest of the division and just go team by team. What scares you most about the division rivals?
So I guess I'll start with the Ravens. They're the obvious one. I mean, they're still, in my mind, like a top 2 or 3 team in the NFL right now. I mean, Lamar Jackson's just coming off an MVP season. I think it's more so what scares me the most about the Ravens, though, is their defense, because their offense doesn't really scare me as much, especially given the fact that the Steelers have a Super Bowl caliber defense, and the fact that Lamar Jackson, statistically, his worst game last season came against Pittsburgh. So the Steelers know how to handle him. I mean, they've seen him 4 times now over the past 2 seasons. So I'm not as worried about him and their offense. It's really the defense, especially if we start going into games against them. If like Roethlisberger's hurt again, their defense, them and Pittsburgh are definitely right there in my mind with the best defenses in the AFC. Maybe I think Buffalo could probably challenge too, but the Steelers and Ravens I think are the top 2 defenses in the AFC. So I think I would expect the 2 games this year to be defensive struggles, which probably isn't something that you would expect given the past few seasons with the Steelers and the Ravens, how they were trying to focus more on offense. The Steelers were becoming more of a shootout team, but thanks to Roethlisberger's injury, the Steelers went back to their roots and went back to getting a Super Bowl caliber defense. So, but yeah, the Ravens are obviously the biggest threat. They're scary. Just everything about them is scary. Unfortunately, I can't pick out just one thing about them. The Browns, I think the biggest thing for me about Cleveland is, can they live up to their potential? Because if they live up to their potential, then I think they can be a really good team. They have the star power on offense with Chubb and Odell and Jarvis Landry. If Baker Mayfield can cut down on his mistakes. And the other thing about the Browns that doesn't get talked about is their defense. They also have a really good defense. It's probably not a top 5 defense, but I would say it's a top 10 defense. So it's more so, but can they live up to that potential? Because we've seen all the hype around them last year, and then look what happened. They turned into a 7-9 team that never had any real shot of making the playoffs. So if they can live up to that potential, then that'll scare me. But if they just turn into the Cleveland Browns again, or if they do what they did last year, nothing changes, then they don't scare me too much. And then of course the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, I don't know if I'm really scared of them at all. Joe Burrow is going to be coming into his rookie season. Obviously, he's going to have to adjust to the NFL, but there really is nothing on the Bengals team that scares me right now. I mean, I would be surprised if they got more than 4 or 5 wins again this year. So if the Steelers, in those 2 games that we played the Bengals, if we don't just absolutely steamroll them, then I'm going to start having concerns. Maybe that's what scares me about the Bengals, is if we don't beat them by large margins, then it's going to scare me for the future of the Steelers this season.
All right, so yeah, I agree. The Bengals definitely the weakest of the 4 teams in the AFC North. So now Nate and I are going to share our 1 to 4 predictions for the division. I'll go first with my predictions. So I'll start with number 4 with the Bengals, like Connor was saying. I do think that this has the potential to be a good team in the future, but Joe Burrow is a rookie. It's very rare rookie quarterbacks make the playoffs. Their team should be a lot better than it was last year. Getting AJ Green back, they've got Boyd, drafted T. Higgins, Joe Mixon's a decent running back, and their offensive lineman Jonah Williams was injured all of last year. So I do think the Bengals are going to be better than they were last year, but the defense is still bad. The offensive line is still bad. And Burrow is coming into his rookie year, so that's why I've got the Bengals in fourth. In a tough division here, they're realistically not going to be able to get to third.
Fundamentals of blocking and tackling, you can't do that.
Yeah. And then in third place, I'm going to have the Pittsburgh Steelers, Connor's team here. It's a solid team, but my biggest concerns are we see this year in and year out is it's very difficult to retain that Super Bowl level of a defense. And that's really what I'm most worried about here. I think the defense it's obviously still going to be solid, but they straight up won games last year with their defense, scoring points, and getting a lot of pick sixes, I think, turnovers. That's the kind of stuff that it's hard to replicate over time. Really, the last really legendary defense was the Seahawks Legion of Boom for a couple of seasons. So I just want to see if they can sustain their defensive play because we've seen Jacksonville, we've seen Chicago in recent memory have tremendous seasons and then come back the next year more average. So that's what I'm thinking the Steelers defense isn't going to live up to what they did last year. And then I think on the opposite side, though, the offense should be a lot better. Ben's coming back. He's going to be a lot better. I just don't think Ben is going to have the type of season he had 2 years ago, less weapons than he did 2 years ago with Bell and AB. So I've got the Steelers in third. And then in second, shocker here, guys, I've got the Baltimore Ravens actually in second. I think in last year's playoffs, the formula was found to beat Lamar Jackson. And not every team is going to have the type of team that Tennessee did. So I'm not just saying, oh, now the Baltimore is going to go winless or anything like that. Obviously, I'm not that crazy. But the formula was found, and that's make Lamar Jackson really rough him up. Don't let him get to the outside. Don't let him run around on you. And also, too, with the Ravens, I think they're going to be a lot more conservative with Lamar than they were last year as far as running. I don't think he's going to get 1,000 yards rushing this year. I think they're going to try and conserve him more for the playoffs and for the future of his career. So that's why I don't think Lamar is going to be a back-to-back MVP. And I think that's going to take a little bit of a hit on them. Their defense, I think, did get better over the offseason with Calais Campbell, Patrick Queen, the draft pick. Still a really solid team, a lot of good weapons. But the thing is these running NFL teams in today's NFL, it's just so much harder to sustain that from year to year. The fact that they're not an air-it-out team gets me a little bit concerned because when you really need to throw the ball, I actually I'm going to trust Cleveland more this year. So Cleveland Browns, I've got at number one. I'm extremely bullish on the Browns this year because I still think Baker Mayfield is a really good quarterback. He struggled a lot last year, but the thing is that the Browns did get a lot better. They drafted an offensive lineman. They signed the top right tackle in Jack Conklin, added a solid tight end. This offense is loaded. So the fact that I still believe Baker is going to be a good quarterback, and I think last year there was just so much hype, so much expectations, and so much drama with Odell Beckham not getting the type of season that he was used to having. I think all that stuff has kind of settled down. They fired Freddie Kitchens, who shouldn't have been a head coach. And by the way, Nick Chubb was, I believe, second last year in rushing yards. So they have a great running back. They have a quarterback who I think everybody's sleeping on. And obviously, we all know the wide receivers, the tight ends. The key was the offensive line, and they fixed that this year. Now, the defense is the weaker part of this team. There's no question about that. Losing Schobert hurts, but I think a lot of their young secondary picks in recent drafts are going to get better, like Greedy Williams. So, as crazy as it sounds, I think the Browns are going to win this division just because everybody's sleeping on them. I think all the expectations, all the hype from last year, it was just met with so much disappointment that people are kind of writing the Browns off. But still think they're super talented. I think they actually did beat Baltimore once last year, so they've shown that they can do that. They did beat Pittsburgh as well. It was a crazy game, but um, that's giving me a little bit more confidence too to pick the Browns. So that's my 1-4. Nate, what about you?
All right, so I'll do the same thing. I'll start from the bottom. Same thing here. I've got Cleveland. I mean, sorry, Cincinnati coming in fourth place in the North. Obvious reasons. They're the worst team. With the number one draft pick last year. Joe Burrow's going to come in, probably start day one, but I don't see how he's going to make a big enough impact to get them out of the cellar. There's not enough talent across the rest of the roster. Aside from AJ Green coming back will help. But I don't think they're good enough all around to really compete in this division. And then in third place, I'm not as bullish on Cleveland as Zach is. I have them at third place, mainly because I'm kind of on the other side of the fence from Zach. I just don't believe in Baker Mayfield. I'd like to see him prove it some more this year. They've had a really down season last year based on compared to all the hype they had, and to me, the roster hasn't improved a whole lot. I mean, they already had great receivers in Odell and Jarvis, and obviously Nick Chubb. So he's had some great weapons to work with for all of last year. I'd like to see him put it all together. And I could be totally wrong on this, but I just don't see it happening this division for them this year. So going to number 2, I've got Pittsburgh. I went back and forth between Pittsburgh and Baltimore. I don't think, obviously, spoiler alert, Baltimore's number 1. I don't think they will be as good this year, but I still have to give them the edge. Kind of like what Zach said, and I agree with him on this one, that Pittsburgh did win a lot of games. Obviously, with by nature of Big Ben being out, their offense couldn't be as good, so they relied on their defense more to win games. And I think we've seen that a lot with teams like the Jags in 2017 to 2018, and then teams like Chicago from 2018 to last season, where they had an incredible defense that was, locking teams, not only locking teams down, but scoring touchdowns for them. And I think that kind of production is unreplicable just because by nature of turnovers, they're unpredictable. Like, as good as you are, you can force turnovers to an extent, but it's like, you can't get interceptions just by pure skill. Like, they have to be, mistakes and stuff. So I think Pittsburgh's obviously still going to have a great defense, but I don't think they're going to be, best in the league caliber again. I mean, they very well might be, but if not, I think that puts them a step back. And then Ben, his health is a question mark for me just because he is getting, I wouldn't say old. He still has some more years in him, but even if he misses, 4 or 5 games with a minor injury, that could be a potentially derailing thing for Pittsburgh. So I don't think they're going to be bad by any means, but just, a sliver behind Baltimore, who obviously they're my number 1 team. I'm predicting. I think I'm not totally in agreement with Zach here. I think teams have figured out their offense to an extent, but I think there's only so much you can do against Lamar Jackson. Obviously, he didn't have a good showing versus the Titans in the playoffs, but I think for a whole season, it's hard to stop a guy like that. I think he is still going to produce, and you've got apparently Hollywood Brown was playing through injuries last year, so that's potentially a great number 1 receiver for him with some speed on the outside. They still got good running backs, good solid defense, like the addition of Calais Campbell. So I think overall, I'm going to give them the edge over the Pittsburgh Steelers, but not a huge edge like last year. So definitely an interesting division to be sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
well, I guess before we move on to the AFC East, we didn't officially say this, but I guess my division 1 through 4, I don't know if you couldn't get it from what I was saying, but I have it the same as Nate. Like, I've got Baltimore 1, Pittsburgh 2, Cleveland 3, and Cincinnati 4. So
yeah,
not
true. I forgot to ask you about that, but the way you were talking, it kind of just sounded like that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna head over to the AFC East, talk about those teams now for a minute. Nate, being a Patriots fan, is gonna mainly talk about the Pats. but at the end, like we just did, we'll share our thoughts about all the teams in the AFC East. So we'll get you started, Nate, with the first question. What are your expectations for the Patriots this season?
Yeah, so I know we've talked about some of our early episodes back in more of the spring, like around draft time and free agency, where my expectations were definitely tempered a lot for the Pats this season with obviously Tom Brady going to Tampa, a few other guys like Kyle Van Noy, and Landon Roberts ending up on other teams as free agents. Definitely some kind of questionable, um, moves there. Not sure how they're gonna be, but I think my attitude on them is definitely like improved in the last few months. Or I mean, few weeks specifically. Um, I think with the addition of Cam Newton, that definitely makes me feel better about the quarterback void. Um, some players have opted out for the COVID reasons, which the Pats were hit, I think most out of any team in the league by a decent amount.
By
A ton
far,
of
yeah.
a ton of guys opted
Most
out.
other teams only had like 2 or 3, and the Pats had like 7 or 8.
Yeah, so that definitely hurts as far as putting together a full roster. Obviously, going to get the spots filled, but just in terms of replacing guys who were not necessarily all stars, a few of them were, but just solid contributors from last year that now you got to fill those spots. So my expectations are definitely tempered. I don't think, we're going to the Super Bowl or anything this year, but I definitely feel better about their ability to compete now that they've done a pretty good job of filling the quarterback spot there. So I will obviously get into it as I answer the next few questions here, but I definitely could see them making a surprise run at the AFC East or a playoff spot.
All right. So, question number 2, just tell us who you're most excited about for your team on the offense and on defense.
All right. So on offense, kind of just touched on it, but um, I got to go with Cam Newton here. With Tom Brady leaving, that's obviously the end of an era. One of the best quarterbacks to ever play. That obviously hurts the team, but I think them bringing in Cam Newton was a really good move, in my opinion. Obviously, you got him for extremely cheap. For the potential talent you could get. And based on the reports I've been seeing from, their training camp and what the coaches have had to say, he's making very good progress with the playbook, and he looks like the Cam Newton of previous seasons, which gets me really excited just because you can do a whole lot. Obviously, he's not Tom Brady, but you can do a whole lot of other things that Brady could never do as far as, he's going to let Josh McDaniels get really creative as far as drawing up runs and play action and stuff. And from Cam's point of view, even looking back to when Carolina went to the Super Bowl, I think this could potentially be the best group of skill position players he's had around him in his career. Obviously, there's no one like Christian McCaffrey who he had for a season and a half, but I think you look at Edelman and Mohamed Sanu if he stays healthy, N'Keal Harry, James White, all those guys I think is as good of skill players as he's been around in his career. So I'm looking for a big year out of Cam, assuming he gets a starting job day one, which I think.
I think we lost Nate there for
Going
a
over
second.
the defensive side of the.
Oh, okay. Oh, there you are. All right, keep going. Nate?
I think Nate's having some issues here.
Yeah, let me check the Skype call real quick.
No, he's still in it. I think he's just got.
Oh, hello.
There he is.
Okay, we last heard you saying talking about like Cam being the starter.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, where did I cut out?
With Cam being the starter.
Yeah. Nate? Oh gosh. Technology sometimes, guys. All right, I guess in the meantime, well, he did kind of answer question 5. I think it's pretty obvious he thinks Cam's going to be the starter.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to ask him between Cam and Jarrett Stidham, who he thinks is going to be the starter.
Yeah.
But I guess obviously seeing in practice, Stidham didn't he threw like 7 interceptions over the course of like 3 practices or something. So I think that probably only further confirms that Cam is going to be the day one starter.
Yeah, for sure. So, Nate, by the way, if you're here, just cut us out. Okay, you're here?
All right, yeah, You hear
Okay,
me?
so we last heard
All
you
right.
talk about Cam as the starter.
Okay. Yes, that basically is obviously who was kind of heard you guys talking. That's who's most excited for on offense. On defense, it's definitely going to be interesting. Look, they had to replace a bunch of linebackers. I think the guy I'm most excited for, it's more so like intrigue, I guess, is the Kyle Duggar, the safety they selected from Division II Lenore Ryan in the second round of the draft. Um, he's been making some plays in camp from what I can tell. Obviously, there's not as much media there with the COVID restrictions, so I don't totally know how great he's been on a play basis. But I think I'm really excited to see how he can translate to um, the skill level in the NFL. He could potentially be a great asset for this Pats defense, especially with Patrick Chung sitting out this year due to COVID. It could definitely be a huge help, or else he might not be able to make the jump. His athleticism may not translate to the NFL, and he might just be a bust. So I would say not necessarily excitement is in. I think he's going to be the best player in the league or anything, but I'm more so like intrigued just to out of anyone on defense. That's who I really want to see get some live reps and see what he can bring to the table.
Yeah. All right. So you've already touched on how big you think Brady leaving will be for them, and then you talked about how many COVID opt-outs the Patriots had. So between free agency losses and the COVID opt-outs, other than Tom Brady, of course, because I know that's who you'd pick,
Yeah.
who is the most impactful of those losses for the season?
I would definitely say between free agency losses and COVID opt-outs, I would say that's definitely hurt the linebacker position overall. I mean, uh, I think most impactful has got to be Dante Hightower sitting out for COVID. Obviously, he's been a key piece of the defense for what, like 8 years now. It's been a while. He's made obviously huge plays in 2 Super Bowls, and he's really the leader of that defense. And for him to be sitting out is definitely some younger guys have to step up, especially because now Kyle Van Noy was signed with Detroit, I believe, and then Landon Roberts was signed by Miami. So
What a
they're looking
shock
at
going
all.
to Matt Patricia.
Yeah, another guy out to Detroit, I guess. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see who can step up there. I would say most impactful definitely is losing Hightower, but those other guys had a ton of experience and athletic ability that it'll be interesting to see who they can put out there to replace that.
All right, Connor, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, so obviously, I think we already talked that you already answered my other question about who's going to be the day one quarterback starter. But my other question would be, Brady went to Tampa Bay, Gronk went to Tampa Bay. So if the one of the three Musketeers was left behind, it was Julian Edelman. So how do you think Julian Edelman's going to perform this year without Tom Brady? Because obviously Edelman was Brady's like safety blanket, and
Yeah.
obviously all those drag routes over the middle were his specialty. So how do you think Edelman's going to do with Cam Newton / Jarrett Stidham?
Yeah, that's what's gonna be really interesting to me is because um, Edelman definitely like brings the classic slot receiver skill set to the table, and I think he's um, definitely has the skills to cut it with any team out there, just as a basic slot receiver. But I think his chemistry with Brady is really what made him a borderline elite receiver. Always a threat to get 800 to 1,000 yards in the season. Um, so it's difficult to see how he'll be without that because they just had such a great like relationship. They would go out to California and throw in the off season, and I think that was a big reason why he was always open and the connection was so natural between them. So I'm interested to see what he can do with either. I'm assuming Newton will be the day one starter, or else Stidham. What he can do with a few months of work with those guys. I think he'll still be the top look. Definitely his experience and route running ability and his hands, all that stuff's not going to go away. But I don't know that we're going to see him catch 80, 90 balls again this year. It might be closer to 60, something like that. I think they're going to try and get more guys like N'Keal Harry involved. Hopefully he can take a step forward, and they're going to get James White involved, catching a lot of passes. So I think he'll do well, but I'm just not expecting a huge statistical season from him this year. Obviously, if he stays healthy, he'll be a big cog in the offense, but I think definitely will be lower stats than we're used to out of him.
All right, so that'll wrap up the majority of the Patriots talk here, but go ahead, Nate, and talk about the division rivals. What scares you the most between those three teams?
All right, yeah, so a little bit of a different division here than with Connor and the AFC North. The only team that really, I would say, scares me would be the Bills. Obviously, they have a great defense. Josh Allen took a pretty decent step forward last year. Still not, I would say, an elite quarterback, but he definitely can play. Um, and he can definitely do enough to keep his team in the game with that defense they have. So that definitely scares me, especially with a new quarterback. Tom Brady always had his way with the Bills over the 20 years he was here, so I never really feared them, even as they improved. But um, with a new quarterback running the show, it definitely will make me nervous seeing how they do against that Bills defense. So it's definitely they're going to be the ones in the way of trying to win the AFC East. Other than them, obviously it's hard to say the Jets scare anybody. This is such a this is a badly run organization that there's not really anything there that's scary. I mean, Jamal Adams is gone. Um, Sam Darnold has never got it done versus the Pats defense. He was seeing ghosts last year. And Le'Veon Bell, we'll see if and we'll see if Le'Veon Bell can take a step forward again this year. But other than those two guys, there's not really a whole lot there to be afraid of. And the Dolphins, I think, will be sneaky good this year. It all depends, obviously, on how Tua or Fitzpatrick can perform. Obviously, the Dolphins have given the Pats trouble in recent years, even when they were awful and the Pats were in Super Bowl contention. There's always gonna be a couple weird games versus them, so they've always scared me. On paper, not that scary, but they've added a couple former Pats. They've got Brian Flores, who obviously knows the organization very well, so they'll definitely be a threat when it gets to the actual game time. But on paper, there's not a whole lot, I would say, that's different than last year, unless obviously Tua can come in and play like a top 5 pick.
Yeah. All right. So just go ahead and confirm your 1-4 predictions now that you've talked about all four teams.
All right, so like last time, I'll go from the bottom up. Um, I've got the Jets coming in last place for reasons I kind of just touched on. Miami's going to be in third place. Definitely a lot of question marks there. I didn't feel comfortable bumping them up. And this is kind of going to be a surprise, I think. I'm a little bit more bullish on the Pats than most people, but I have Buffalo in second place and New England in first place. For some reason, I just have a really good feeling about what Cam Newton's going to bring to this team. I hope I'm right, but I have the Pats edging out the Bills. Not a huge gap there, because like I said, the Bills have that great defense. So it's definitely going to be a tough fight between those two teams, but I could see the Pats winning 10, 11 games and eking out the AFC East. So definitely be interesting to see there.
Uh-huh. All right, so I'll give my 1-4, and then Connor will follow up with his. So starting in fourth, I've got the Jets Suck. I had to do that. Gosh, I mean, the Jets are just so dysfunctional, and that's coming from a Jaguars fan. That line's going to be played.
Zach's like, trust me, I've got experience with dysfunctional teams.
Yeah, really. Sam Darnold, like Nate said, was seeing ghosts last year. Just nothing much really there with him that scares me at all. Bottom dweller for sure. Should be some easy wins for the other three teams this year. In third, I've got the Miami Dolphins, and like Nate was saying, this is a scary team. I've contemplated them going up to second. I don't think they're quite good enough to win the division, but I have contemplated them finishing second just because they ended the season so strong last year with such a bad team on paper, and they spent a lot of money in free agency. They had all those draft picks. Getting Tua, they surely should be better than they were last year. Um, and Brian Flores is a really good coach as well. Three really good coaches in this division with the top three teams, in my opinion. So I contemplated the Dolphins going up to second, but playing it more safe, I'm going to keep them in third. And then I've got the Patriots in second. Um, Tough, in my opinion, to pick between them and the Bills for 1 and 2, but with this year being the COVID off season, only 11 padded practices for each team. The Bills really are bringing back a majority of what they had last year. Having that continuity is really key for a season like this. So, with a new starting quarterback, with all those opt outs too, that was another thing that pushed the Bills above them, in my opinion, was just the sheer amount of opt outs that they had for COVID. And they all those free agency losses that they had in addition to Brady. So the greatness of Belichick will surely be tested this season, but I don't think that they're going to be good enough to win first place. I think the Bills, who I'm not extremely high on, I don't think the Bills are a Super Bowl threat, but they showed last year. They really proved me wrong last year. Made it to the playoffs, came really close to winning that playoff game against Houston. The thing that I guess worries me about the Bills is Josh Allen, but like you said, he did take strides. He's not elite or anything, but when you compare, if you were to compare the Bills to like say the Jaguars or Bears, those type of teams, and that we talked about last time, um, Josh Allen's a better quarterback than both those guys, Bortles and Trubisky. So even though he's not the greatest quarterback in that lateral that he tried to do in the Houston game was a boneheaded decision, but I'm sure he's not going to make that mistake again. But the rest of the team is really solid. I'm a big Singletary fan as well, so I like the Bills to finish first in the division. Connor, what about you?
Yeah, so I guess I'm probably going to sound like a broken record with the same with Zach. Obviously, last place, the New York Jets. I mean, I don't know what else you can say just about how much this team sucks, but I mean, they're just the epitome of awful. I mean, it's gonna be between like them and Washington, and like maybe like the Jaguars. And I mean, if the Bengals are down there, they're not gonna pick Trevor Lawrence because they already got Burrow. But like, I think it's gonna be between them and Washington, and like possibly the Jaguars for like tanking for Trevor, but mostly between the Jets and Redskins. Well, not the Redskins, but the Washington football team. But yeah, the Jets are terrible. Nothing, and especially also the fact that their best defensive player was one of the people that opted out. So like the one good thing you had on your defense, and he opted out. So not expecting any more. I would be shocked if they got more than 3 wins. Like who knows? This team might go 0-16. I don't know. Not predicting that, but they could. And then, yeah, I'm also the same as Zach. Like, I really contemplated putting the Dolphins up at number 2. They brought in a lot of young talent. I think it's more so for me, like, the issues, like, I don't think I would put the Dolphins up there because I think the Dolphins are going to be a whole lot better. I think it's because I think the Patriots are going to be quite a bit worse, is why I was contemplating putting the Dolphins up there. But they do have a lot of good young talent, and like Zach said, they finished the year strong last year, and they just, if Tua can evolve into a good NFL quarterback, then I could see them going 500. I don't know if they'll compete for a wild card position or not, but obviously with 7 teams in the playoffs now, going 500 could very well give you a playoff spot. So then with the Patriots at number 2, just I think probably one of the overall number 1 reason why I put the Patriots still above Miami was because of Bill Belichick. Like, I trust Bill Belichick. He's the greatest coach in the history of the NFL, and he'll somehow find a way to take ragtag players that wouldn't even be starters on other teams and somehow turn them into a Super Bowl contender. So
also might do something illegal too that gives them an advantage.
So, but I think the main concerns for the Patriots this year are obviously going to be on the defense. The offense, the biggest thing is not having a tight end anymore. Like, I don't even know who their number one tight end is supposed to be this year. I guess Nate probably knows, but it's probably no one I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
So, they have that issue, and obviously, can Edelman be the same without Tom Brady? And if he's not, then can Sanu and N'Keal Harry? Obviously, Sanu is a veteran, but N'Keal Harry being still only a second-year player, can he carry this pass attack? I think the key for the Patriots this year is really going to be their run game. They're going to kind of have like a 4 running back committee this year, which is kind of interesting because they've got obviously the 3 familiar faces, James White, Sony Michel, Rex Burkhead, but they also brought in Lamar Miller in the offseason. So I'm interested to see how that's going to work because, any one of those 4 guys, like, especially between Sony Michel and Lamar Miller could be starters on other teams, James White too. I think I'm interested to see where Rex Burkhead fits into that quadruple, I don't know what I'm trying to say, 4 running back tandem, because he's probably the worst out of the 4, but Burkhead has he's been with New England for quite a while now, so he fits into their system, so he's going to get used. Then on the defense, like, it's just I think it's more so the defensive line and the linebackers. Losing Dante Hightower, I think, was a really major blow to them because they don't really have any other big time, linebackers especially losing Kyle Van Noy. They don't have any other linebackers that are really familiar and have been there for a long time. They don't have any superstar defensive linemen. I mean, Lawrence Guy's been there for a while and he's decent, but nobody really stands out. The secondary is still going to be good. I mean, you still have Stephon Gilmore. You still have the McCourty brothers. Even losing Patrick Chung, I think the secondary is going to be in good shape, but it's just the rest of the defense that worries me. So then obviously I've got the Bills at number 1. The Bills, I'm probably the most high on this team this year out of any of the guys on this podcast. We obviously don't know what Eric's predictions are for the AFC East, but I mean, my dad was super upset too because he was like, this is the one year that we have a really good team and it has to be the freaking COVID season. Like the one year that the Bills actually have a team, the year that the Patriots are down and out, the year that's supposed to be our time, and it's the COVID season, and it might not even happen. So, but definitely the Bills. I mean, I think they kind of have bucked the trend of like what Zach was talking about earlier with the defenses like not keeping up. I think the Bills have had a really good defense for 3 or 4 seasons now, and it's going to be all the same guys coming back again. So, and guys like Ed Oliver and Tremaine Edmonds are only going to get better. So, the obviously no issues on that side of the ball. And I think what's going to put them over the top was getting Stephon Diggs in the offseason, because now they have a true number 1 receiver that Josh Allen can throw to. They still have a couple somewhat decent tight ends, and Devin Singletary's a beast. I mean, I didn't expect him to do as good as he did last year, but I mean, the guy is a tackle breaking machine. He's like the next evolution of Marshawn Lynch when it comes to breaking tackles. So I'm actually really high on the Buffalo Bills. They're definitely not as good as the Chiefs or the Ravens in my book, but I definitely think they could be like the number 3 seed in the AFC. And if all the pieces are there, then I think they could be in for a long playoff run, possibly get to the AFC Championship game. I don't know if they'll make it to I don't think they'll make it to the Super Bowl just because, again, I think KC/Baltimore are better. But definitely, I think AFC Championship could be a realistic possibility for the Buffalo Bills for me.
All right, guys, and that's going to wrap up our division episode with the AFC East and AFC North. Next week's episode, we're going to have a special guest on to talk about the Eagles and the NFC East, so stay tuned for that. And then that's actually going to wrap up our division episodes. We're canceling out the West this year, not because we don't like them, but just for time purposes with the season approaching rapidly, just a couple weeks away now. So stay tuned for that, and good analysis. Good job, Connor and Nate, by filling in as our fan team correspondents here on your analysis. So until next time, guys, take it easy and remember, be clutch.
Bye.
For Eric, peace.